What if every single morning you had the power to slow down, or even reverse, the signs of aging? Not with expensive creams or gimmicks, but with simple habits that heal your body from the inside out. After 50, aging feels faster. Sleep feels lighter, joints feel stiffer. But the secret isn't just in what you take, it's in how you start your day. These 5 morning rituals can literally reset your body's aging clock. Most people don't know them, but today, you will, if you're over 50 and want to feel younger, stronger, and more in control of your health. Hit that like button and subscribe. Share your morning ritual in the comments. Someone out there might need your story today. After a full night's sleep, which usually lasts between 7 to 8 hours, the body naturally wakes up in a dehydrated state. This is because the body has been without water for many hours during sleep, and it loses moisture through breathing and sweating. Rehydrating first thing in the morning is essential for overall health, and one of the most effective ways to do this is by drinking a glass of warm lemon water. This simple habit can have powerful effects on your body's ability to slow the aging process, support vital organs, and promote radiant skin. Warm lemon water acts as a gentle stimulant for the digestive system. It encourages the production of digestive juices and bile, which helps the liver carry out its detoxification processes more efficiently. The liver is a key organ responsible for filtering toxins from the blood, metabolizing fats, and maintaining energy balance. By supporting the liver's natural functions, warm lemon water helps the body flush out harmful substances that can contribute to inflammation and premature aging. Moreover, warm lemon water assists in rehydrating every cell in the body. Proper hydration is critical to maintaining the elasticity and suppleness of the skin. Many skincare experts emphasize the importance of vitamin C in daily routines to help prevent the formation of fine lines and wrinkles. Beyond skin health, warm lemon water can support the immune system. The vitamin C content helps strengthen the body's defense against infections and illnesses, which is particularly important as we age. A stronger immune system means the body is better equipped to fight off viruses and bacteria, reducing inflammation and supporting overall vitality. Drinking warm lemon water also encourages gentle detoxification through increased urination. This process helps eliminate excess sodium and toxins that may otherwise contribute to bloating and sluggishness. Some health professionals note that this detox effect can improve digestion and reduce the burden on the kidneys, organs that also play a crucial role in maintaining the body's internal balance. The warmth of the water has additional benefits. Warm liquids can soothe the digestive tract and improve circulation, which helps nutrients travel more efficiently throughout the body. Enhanced circulation supports skin health and overall energy levels, helping seniors feel more awake and ready for the day. Experts suggest making this a daily ritual. Drinking lemon water first thing in the morning maximizes its benefits because the digestive system is most receptive at this time. Cold drinks can shock the system and slow down digestion, while warm lemon water offers a gentle, natural start. The habit also promotes mindfulness, encouraging individuals to pause and care for their bodies as part of a healthy morning routine. It is important to note that lemon water is best consumed freshly squeezed. Bottled lemon juices often contain preservatives and added sugars, which counteract the health benefits. For those concerned about tooth enamel erosion from the acidity of lemon, using a straw and rinsing the mouth with plain water afterward can help minimize any potential damage. Overall, incorporating warm lemon water into the morning routine provides a natural boost to hydration, digestion, liver detoxification, and skin health. It's a simple, accessible step that supports many aspects of the body's function related to aging. For seniors looking to maintain youthful vitality, this ritual is a foundational habit that aligns well with medical advice on healthy aging. Consistently drinking warm lemon water not only replenishes fluids lost overnight, but also sets a positive tone for the day ahead, reminding the body of its capacity to heal, renew, and thrive with small but impactful choices. Morning sunlight plays a vital role in regulating the body's internal clock, known as the circadian rhythm. This natural rhythm governs sleep-wake cycles, hormone release, and many other essential bodily functions. Exposure to sunlight early in the day sends a strong signal to the brain's suprachiasmatic nucleus, which helps reset the circadian clock and promotes a healthy sleep pattern. Research shows that seniors who receive regular morning sunlight experience better sleep quality, which is crucial for overall health and aging well. One of the most important benefits of morning sunlight is its ability to stimulate the production of vitamin D in the skin. Vitamin D is essential for bone health, immune function, and mood regulation. After age 50, maintaining adequate vitamin D levels becomes especially important because it helps reduce the risk of osteoporosis, supports muscle function, and may even play a role in protecting against chronic diseases. However, vitamin D deficiency is common among older adults, partly due to less time spent outdoors and the skin's reduced ability to synthesize this vitamin. Spending just 10 to 20 minutes in the sun each morning can significantly improve vitamin D levels, supporting better health and vitality. Alongside sunlight, gentle movement in the morning is equally beneficial. Activities such as stretching, yoga, or a short walk help activate muscles and joints, preparing the body for the day ahead. Movement increases blood flow and helps lubricate the joints, which can become stiff with age. This early activation reduces discomfort, improves flexibility, and lowers inflammation, a key factor in many age-related health issues. Studies indicate that morning movement also stimulates the release of endorphins, natural mood elevators, which contribute to reduced stress and a greater sense of well-being. For seniors, this boost can improve mental clarity and motivation throughout the day. Additionally, physical activity encourages the body's lymphatic system to clear toxins and supports better circulation, further promoting overall health. Regular morning exposure to sunlight combined with movement creates a powerful synergy that enhances sleep quality. The circadian rhythm relies heavily on light cues, and when paired with physical activity, it helps synchronize the body's internal systems. Doctors often recommend this combination for seniors struggling with insomnia or disrupted sleep patterns. By stabilizing the circadian rhythm, seniors can enjoy deeper, more restorative sleep, which supports memory, immune function, and cellular repair, processes that slow down as the body ages. In addition to these benefits, sunlight and movement help counteract common age-related issues, such as muscle weakness and joint pain. A brief morning walk or gentle stretches increase muscle strength and endurance, helping seniors maintain independence and reduce the risk of falls. This physical activation also combats chronic inflammation, a silent contributor to many aging-related diseases. The anti-inflammatory effects of movement have been confirmed by numerous studies, which emphasize the importance of regular, low-impact exercise in managing pain and stiffness. Sunlight exposure also positively affects mood by increasing serotonin levels in the brain. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that influences feelings of happiness and calmness. Low serotonin levels are linked to depression and anxiety, conditions that can worsen with age. Morning sunlight, therefore, offers a natural way to improve emotional health and combat the loneliness or isolation some seniors experience. For those unable to go outside, sitting near a window with ample sunlight still provides some benefits, though direct outdoor exposure is preferable for optimal vitamin D synthesis. Even on cloudy days, natural light helps maintain circadian rhythms better than artificial lighting. It is important to balance sunlight exposure to avoid skin damage. Doctors advise limiting sun exposure during peak ultraviolet hours and wearing protective clothing or sunscreen as needed. Morning sunlight before 10 a.m. tends to have less intense UV rays and is safer for skin while still providing the health benefits. Integrating sunlight and movement into a morning routine requires minimal effort, but offers far-reaching health advantages. The combination supports physical mobility, mental health, skin health, and sleep quality, all of which are essential for aging gracefully. This natural duo can help seniors feel more energized, reduce inflammation, and maintain vital body functions. In conclusion, embracing the habit of stepping outside into the morning light and engaging in gentle movement is a proven strategy to regulate the circadian rhythm, boost vitamin D levels, and activate the body's muscles and joints. This daily ritual promotes better sleep, reduces stiffness, lowers inflammation, and enhances mood. For seniors over 50, these simple yet powerful actions can make a significant difference in slowing the aging process and improving quality of life. Consistency is key, and by committing to this practice, seniors can nurture their bodies with the natural rhythms of light and movement that support lifelong health and well-being. Cold water applied to the face or experienced through a cold shower triggers several beneficial responses that contribute to healthier, younger-looking skin and improved overall well-being. One of the most immediate effects is skin tightening. When cold water touches the skin, it causes the blood vessels to constrict, reducing swelling and puffiness that often appear in the morning or after a restless night. This vasoconstriction helps the skin appear firmer and more toned, diminishing the look of tiredness and aging. Beyond the visible effects on skin, cold water therapy activates the vagus nerve, a critical part of the parasympathetic nervous system. This nerve plays a central role in regulating stress and promoting relaxation. Stimulating the vagus nerve through cold exposure encourages the body to lower levels of stress hormones, such as cortisol, which, when elevated for long periods, accelerate aging and contribute to chronic inflammation. Lower cortisol levels help reduce inflammation, improve immune function, and protect the body from the harmful effects of stress. Research increasingly supports the idea that activating the vagus nerve through cold water immersion or face splashes can boost mood and mental clarity. This stimulation triggers the release of neurotransmitters like norepinephrine, which enhances alertness and helps fight symptoms of depression. The production of certain proteins and hormones involved in cellular repair and longevity. This activation helps slow down the decline in tissue function that naturally occurs with age. It may also support the nervous system's ability to adapt and maintain balance, contributing to improved cognitive health over time. Cold water splashes or showers are also linked to better respiratory function. The sudden exposure to cold water stimulates deeper breathing, increasing oxygen intake and improving lung capacity. This effect benefits cardiovascular health and overall energy levels, supporting seniors in staying active and independent longer. It is important to introduce cold water therapy gradually, especially for those who may have cardiovascular issues or sensitivity to cold. Starting with a gentle splash to the face or a brief cold rinse at the end of a warm shower allows the body to adapt safely. Consulting a healthcare provider before beginning regular cold water exposure is advisable for those with pre-existing health conditions. In summary, cold face splashes or showers offer a simple, natural method to tighten skin, reduce puffiness, and stimulate the vagus nerve. This stimulation lowers stress hormones, improves mood, and activates anti-aging responses within the nervous system. The enhanced circulation and cellular benefits further support skin health and overall vitality. For seniors seeking a practical, effective way to slow the signs of aging, cold water therapy is a valuable addition to a daily self-care routine that nurtures both body and mind. Starting the day with a breakfast high in sugar can have several negative effects, especially for those over 50. Consuming sugary foods in the morning causes a rapid spike in blood sugar levels, followed by an inevitable crash. This crash often leads to feelings of fatigue, brain fog, and irritability, making it harder to concentrate and maintain energy throughout the day. Over time, frequent blood sugar spikes and crashes contribute to insulin resistance, a condition where the body's cells become less responsive to insulin. This not only increases the risk of type 2 diabetes, but also accelerates the aging process. At the cellular level, research has shown that insulin resistance is linked to increased inflammation and oxidative stress, two of the main drivers of aging. These processes damage cells and tissues, leading to common signs of aging such as wrinkles, reduced muscle strength, and cognitive decline. By avoiding sugary breakfasts, seniors can reduce these harmful effects and better protect their bodies against premature aging. On the other hand, a breakfast rich in protein offers many protective benefits. Protein helps stabilize blood sugar levels by slowing down the digestion of carbohydrates and preventing sharp spikes. This steady supply of energy supports sustained mental focus, improved mood, and physical stamina throughout the morning. For seniors, maintaining stable blood sugar is particularly important, as fluctuations can worsen symptoms of chronic conditions like diabetes and cardiovascular disease. Moreover, protein plays a crucial role in preserving muscle mass. As people age, muscle loss or sarcopenia naturally occurs, leading to decreased strength, balance, and mobility. Eating enough protein, especially in the morning, helps counteract this muscle loss by providing the essential amino acids needed for muscle repair and growth. Studies indicate that older adults who consume higher amounts of protein tend to maintain better muscle function and overall physical independence. Beyond muscle preservation, protein also supports bone health. Amino acids from dietary protein stimulate bone-forming cells, helping to maintain bone density and reduce the risk of fractures. Given that osteoporosis and bone fragility are common concerns after 50, a protein-rich breakfast can contribute to stronger, healthier bones over time. Mental sharpness is another critical benefit of a protein-focused morning meal. Protein influences the production of neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, which regulate mood, attention, and cognitive function. A balanced intake of protein at breakfast can help seniors stay alert, improve memory recall, and reduce feelings of anxiety or depression. Doctors often recommend protein consumption early in the day to support brain health and delay cognitive decline. Examples of high-protein breakfast options include eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, lean meats, and plant-based sources such as tofu or legumes. Combining these with healthy fats and fiber-rich vegetables or whole grains can further enhance satiety and nutrient balance, making it easier to maintain a healthy weight and avoid overeating later. In contrast, breakfast high in processed carbohydrates, sugary cereals, or pastries provide little nutritional value and set the stage for blood sugar instability. These foods not only contribute to weight gain and inflammation, but also impair skin health. By breaking down collagen and elastin, the proteins responsible for skin elasticity and youthfulness. In summary, starting the day with a no-sugar, high-protein breakfast offers numerous benefits that directly impact the aging process. By stabilizing blood sugar levels, it prevents energy crashes and insulin resistance, maintain their strength, focus, and vitality, supporting a healthier, more youthful life well beyond 50. Chronic stress is widely recognized by medical experts as one of the most damaging factors to both the brain and body, accelerating the aging process in multiple ways. When stress becomes a constant presence, the body produces elevated levels of cortisol, commonly known as the stress hormone. High cortisol levels over time can impair memory, weaken the immune system, and increase inflammation, all of which contribute to premature aging. Implementing a simple 5-minute mind reset in the morning can significantly counteract these harmful effects and support healthier aging. One effective way to reset the mind is through deep, mindful breathing exercises. Slow, deliberate breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the body's rest and digest functions. This activation lowers heart rate, reduces blood pressure, and decreases cortisol production. Research has shown that practicing deep breathing regularly improves cognitive function, emotional regulation, and resilience against stress. Seniors who adopt this practice often report clearer thinking and a calmer mood, both essential for preserving brain health as they age. Another powerful method to reduce stress is practicing silent gratitude each morning. Taking a moment to silently acknowledge things to be thankful for shifts focus away from worries and negative thoughts. This simple mental exercise has been linked to increased levels of serotonin and dopamine, neurotransmitters that promote feelings of happiness and well-being. Studies indicate that gratitude practices can lower stress hormones, improve sleep quality, and strengthen social connections, all of which support longevity and brain health. Combining these techniques in a 5-minute morning ritual creates a foundation for emotional balance throughout the day. Medical researchers emphasize the importance of managing stress early to prevent the cumulative damage caused by chronic high cortisol. Over time, consistently lowering stress hormones protects the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for memory and learning, which is especially vulnerable to stress-related damage in older adults. Beyond brain protection, reducing cortisol levels helps maintain youthful skin and a strong immune system. Cortisol excess breaks down collagen, leading to wrinkles and sagging skin, while also suppressing immune responses that guard against illness. By calming the mind and body each morning, the skin's appearance improves, and overall health is supported. This mind reset habit requires no special equipment or extensive training. Simply finding a quiet space, sitting comfortably, and focusing on slow inhalations and exhalations by increasing cortisol, which damages the brain, skin, and immune system. A simple 5-minute mind reset each morning, through deep breathing or gratitude, effectively lowers stress hormones, slows the heart rate, and protects memory and mood over time. This accessible habit offers a powerful tool for anyone over 50 seeking to age more gracefully and maintain mental and physical health for years to come.